stuff. So perfect. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about CMA, right? Is that what everybody's expecting? Because that's what I'm planning. So I got thinking I probably maybe should have double checked that. So anyway, okay. So we are going to get rocking and rolling here. So here's what we're going to do. So part of the 12-hour new agent class, part of teaching that is that, let me even back up. Let me give you the background of this, because I don't think I have given the background of this for you guys to understand. A number of years ago, the Division of Real Estate decided that going through real estate school was not enough training for the people who were getting their real estate licenses, which you would probably somewhat agree, meaning in real estate school, what they taught you was how to pass the test. They didn't really teach you how to sell real estate. Well, ironically, they decided that just because you passed the test doesn't mean that you really learned what you needed to know about real estate. But again, like I say, ironically to me, even still with what they came up with then was this 12-hour new agent mandatory class that you have to do during your first 2 years. The idea of it being is to help the agents to really know, I guess, what you learned in school, because a lot of what is required that I teach you as part of the 12-hour new agent still doesn't really get into like, okay, well, how do I go make money in this business? But what had happened is, so I have been running training programs, specifically new agent stuff, for basically 17 years. And I had an agent who had come to the classes. And so I used to actually, before we created this as the 12-hour new agent, I called it tech skills. So I had like the sales skills part of real estate that I trained. And then there was the technical skills side of real estate that I would train. And I had an agent who had come through these tech skills that I was teaching, which was essentially what we're going to talk about today, and how to fill out the buyer paperwork, how to fill out the seller paperwork, how to fill out the real estate purchase contract. And I had an agent who had gone through that, but then the division had created this, you have 12 hours for your first 2 years, has to be this 12-hour CE class. And so the agent had left and gone to the 12-hour CE course, came back, and I said, hey, how was the 12-hour new agent course? And he said, it was really boring. And I said, okay, why was it so boring? And he said, because you had already taught us everything that they talked about in the 12-hour new agent course, which then had me think, well, if that's the case, I should go get approved to teach the 12-hour new agent, so that you didn't have to go learn it in here with me as part of a tech skills class and then go do it again. So that's kind of the basis of this. So now with that as the background, there are some things that I didn't necessarily teach that is part of the 12-hour new agent course that they say that the division has said, if you're going to teach this, this is the curriculum you have to cover in it. And so there are a few things that as we go through this 12-hour new agent stuff that I will say to you guys, okay, this is something that is the division wants to make sure that you know. And so that's where we're going to start today. On the CMA part is there's some pieces that the division wants you to know that honestly probably are good for us to talk about. I didn't talk about it before when I was not part of the 12-hour new agent, but since we are now, we talk about it. So here's where we're going to start is, what is the difference between a CMA, so which we use that acronym CMA, which stands for a competitive market analysis or a comparative market analysis, depending on what people use it as. What is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal?
Appraisal is done by a licensed appraiser, and a CMA is done by a realtor.
Okay, good. So an appraisal is done by a licensed appraiser. CMA is something weird. Huh? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so you guys that are on Zoom, I'm going to have you muted. Feel free to unmute if you have a question or want to make a comment. But I probably will keep you muted just to keep the background noise. All right. So So an appraisal is done by an appraiser who has to go get a license, not real estate, but an appraisal license. And a CMA is done by us as agents. Now, let me ask you this. Which one is more accurate? Okay, so Jaden's saying an appraisal.
I'd say it comes down to the skill set.
Okay, it comes down. So what do you mean by that? Comes down to skill set.
Well, I mean, in general, appraisers are doing that all day, every day, so they're probably a little bit better, but I mean, there's nothing stopping anything from just being really, really good at doing a CMAs. So
Okay.
I think that's kind of just skill set, like.
Okay, good. And that, I actually like that answer. It is because I would probably agree with you. At the end of the day, it comes down to, it depends on who's doing it, meaning of the agent or the appraiser. It probably really depends. But typically what I say is, and I'm not sure that this is what the division necessarily wants me to say as part of this, but this is what I feel like is really the truth, is just in general, I feel like as agents, we typically, and again, I like Aiden's comment of this isn't always necessarily true, it depends on the skill set of the agent. But I feel like as a general rule, personal opinion is that we do a better job of pricing a property than an appraiser would. Now, why?
It matters for us. And an appraiser's just like, here's the paperwork.
Okay, so good. So an appraiser's getting paid either way, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And for us, it matters because that's how we're gonna get paid. Okay, good. So I think there's more to it than that though. But let me ask it this way then. In terms of the public, the general public, who is the general public gonna feel like?
We're
is more-
looking out for the best interest of our client
Okay,
at
good.
the same time.
Okay, good. I like that. Thank you. But in terms of for the general public, if we did a CMA, if they had a choice, we had up here on the board, here's the CMA, here's the appraisal. Which one is the public going to put more trust or faith, or I don't know what word you want to use, credibility? Which one are they gonna feel like is more credible?
The agent,
I think
right?
appraiser probably.
All right,
Just
so we
based
have
off of the
mixed.
public only.
Okay, so why do you say the agent?
Just because they believe we know what's out there, we know the market, and we're able to be, have a, professional opinion of it.
Okay, good. Why do you guys say the appraiser?
That's what they do as their job, and it's done for every house. That's what the public expects.
Okay, good. Yeah, so here's what I would say. Think of it this way, is in the eyes of the public, an appraiser is up here as agents work down here, like probably right next to attorneys. Well, I don't know, used car salesmen. I don't know. But in the public's mind, we're down here, the appraiser's up here. They're typically going to put more weight in that appraisal. And really, at the end of the day, I've always taught this of saying, I felt like we do a better job, but I think what Aiden said is probably better, is depending on the skill set of the person doing it is going to be who's more accurate. But here's why I would say I feel like typically we are a little bit more accurate on it is, let's have a discussion. And before I answer it, let's have a discussion first about how does an appraiser do an appraisal? So if I've got a house here and we have an appraiser come out to do an appraisal on that house, what's, from at least your understanding, what is kind of the criteria that they're going to look for in terms of doing an appraisal on this house?
Comps first.
So, okay, good. So, but like, what are they going to use? How are they going to decide on comps?
Style, bedrooms.
Okay, good. So let's go. So first one's going to be style, let's say, okay? So they want to find a home that is the same style as the subject property. Good. What else?
Square footage.
Okay, good. They're going to look for homes that have about the same amount of square footage.
Was built.
Okay, good. Year built. So year built.
Sort of beds and baths. Oh, what's your thought? Beds and baths or square footage?
So yeah, good question. So for me personally, I feel like square footage is, now for a CMA, and for me in terms of pricing property, I feel like the square footage is more important than the beds and baths. However, there are certain areas, there are certain times that I would say beds and baths are gonna matter. But so from the standpoint of an appraiser, I would agree with what you're saying, is they're gonna create a value for both the square footage and the beds and baths. But from my perspective, and again, in fact, actually, this is a good spot to say this. When I first got my license and I wanted to start learning how to do a CMA, and I'm guessing some of you may feel this way as well, but from my perspective, in doing a CMA is I always just felt like as a new agent that there should be like a computer program, and there are, that you can plug in the information and it's going to spit out the value. Those programs exist. The problem is they're not really that accurate. Like you can't trust them. And I struggled with that because I wanted it to be a science. And so here's what I would tell you I've learned, and we will talk about this a lot as we go through this today, is doing a CMA is more of an art than it is a science. And maybe to some extent, as I'm saying that, is the way that an appraiser tends to attack it is more of like it's a science, but it's actually more of an art than it is a science. And I struggled with that because I'm more of an analytical personality style than a creative. And so from that standpoint, like I hated art in school. I like the sciences. I like math where you can count on it kind of a thing. So just know doing a CMA is more of an art than a science. And so that's why I say a little bit like, well, kind of there are times that you would do beds and baths, but typically it's going to be square footage or whatever. But, okay, good. What else? What other factors are they going to use as kind of a general rule?
Like condition.
Lot
Okay,
size,
good.
I think.
Condition. That's good.
Location.
Okay, so location, let's talk about location for a minute, and then we'll come to acreage. So what are they looking for in terms of location?
A home in like BFE, Nebraska is gonna be a little bit less than, New York, whatever.
Okay, good.
Or like Salt Lake City versus, Nephi.
Okay, good. So how far away from the subject property do they want to find?
Close as possible.
Okay, good.
Quarter mile.
Is it
3
a 3 mile?
3 mile radius.
Okay, so typically what they're gonna be looking at is yes, a radius, and they want to get it within a 1 mile radius is typically what they're looking at. Now, if it's going to be outside of that 1 mile, they're going to have to justify why they went farther. Now, to get even more technical on it, which we're not going to get beyond this, but is they also ideally should have a comparable in the neighborhood that the subject property is in. They want at least one from the subdivision or neighborhood where that property is located at. But typically, just think of it as they're going to go out about a mile. Anything with it further than that, they're going to have to justify why they went further out. Okay, go ahead.
So I guess just in this very specific case, is it good? So say like the Las Vegas Strip is like 1 mile long, and to get a house on the Vegas Strip would be really expensive. And so you really only have, 1 mile to work with, because that's like the value of it, versus like somewhere up like near Bear Lake where there is like, it's all kind of the same, but it's like 30 miles wide. Is that gonna be okay if they're like, hey, we want, 7 miles out, but it doesn't matter because this whole like 30-mile stretch of land is like the same?
Yeah,
Is
so
that like?
that's kind of the key. Is that's what would have to happen is if an appraiser is going to go further out than 1 mile, they're going to have to write in the appraisal, here's why I did that, and they have to justify that why they had to go outside of it. So
So it's just art then, huh? Yeah, because there's.
that's where it's back to more of an art than a science. Yep. Okay, so good. So essentially this is going to be it. So I put acreage up here as well. The acres is, or the lot size is going to play into it as well. But again, back to the art versus a science thing, for me, I would say this is probably the order of importance that I go in. Now, remember, this is an art, not a science, meaning if we had somebody else come up here and teach this class who was going to say, let me teach you how to do a CMA, they may go about it a little bit differently than what I would. Let me give you an example of that. I personally am not a big believer in a price per square foot. And I know there are a lot of agents that are, and it's totally fine. This is where it's more of an art than a science thing to me. But there are a lot of agents who would say, well, the price per square foot is blah. And there's a time for price per square foot, I believe. And again, doesn't mean I'm right. Like, I know there might be some of you who'd be like, no, I put a ton of weight in price per square foot, and that's totally fine. But for me personally, I don't, and the reason I don't is price per square foot does not take into account the lot size. Price per square foot doesn't take into account the condition. Price per square foot doesn't take into account the year built, and a 3-car garage versus a 10-car garage or whatever. So for me, I don't put a lot of weight in it. Now, there are times, so let me say it this way. There are times though that I would, if I feel like I can't do it any other way, I will then start to look at price per square foot. So, and again, there are many different ways we can approach this and attack it. It's just more so of, it's the art, not a science. You're going to hear me keep saying that. All right. So with that in mind, this is typically the way they're going to go about it. Now, when they're looking at comparables, the one thing we've left out off of this list is they are looking for homes that have done what?
Improvements.
Well, sorry, I'm not asking that very well. Let me say it differently. That have sold within what time frame?
Oh,
How
6
far back?
months.
6 months, isn't
Say
it?
that again on Zoom.
6 months.
Okay, so yeah, typically again, so similar to this 1 mile radius thing. Ideally, they want it closer than further away, but if it's within 6 months, they don't have to justify it. If it's older than 6 months, they're gonna have to justify it. The preferred though is gonna be more like 90 days. And especially within what's happened in our market the last little while, the closer to today that you can get, the better off you're gonna be on that. Because has the market changed in 6 months?
Yes.
Yeah, meaning if we went and looked at what a property sold for 6 months ago compared to what it sold for last month, there's gonna be a huge, huge difference in it. Now, with that being said though, here's where now remember, part of what I'm answering for you guys is twofold. One is the difference between a CMA and an appraisal for the sake of the division. But the other thing is I want to show you why I believe we typically do a better job of pricing property. Because they look at the solds. What do they not look at? So they're looking at solds in the last 6 months, meaning they're looking at the past. But when a buyer buys a property, because ultimately at the end of the day, what determines the value of a home is what a reasonable seller would, or a reasonable buyer would pay to a seller for their home. Meaning you're going to have sometimes people that like, I want it because of the exact, it's my mom lives on one side, my sister lives on the other, and I'll pay any price to get that home. Like that's going to be an exception to somebody that would pay too much for a house versus just most reasonable buyers coming in. What's the price that they would pay that a seller's willing to accept is where we're going to have what makes market value. So on an appraisal, they're looking at the past. They're looking at what happened. And to some extent, they have to try to forecast a little bit into the future, which is what allows them then to say, well, prices are going up. But they don't look at it as closely as you and I, meaning any of you that have worked with a buyer before, if you have gone out and shown buyers homes, how long does it take for a buyer? How many homes do you have to go out and show them before they become very intuitive on this price is too high on this house or this one's a good deal?
That's a preference. Because all the buyers are so smart, everyone thinks they're so smart, so everyone has an opinion, but they're gonna tell you what they think. I think typically it's after like 4 or 5 of you showing them.
Yeah, I was gonna say typically after they have
You
seen
educate
a
them.
few houses and things, they become pretty intuitive to walk into a home and be like, yeah, based on what we've seen, this one's overpriced. So part of what I guess I wanted you guys to understand is part of us doing a CMA is we need to think, what we've talked about so far is thinking like a seller. And the way that I say it is the way that an appraiser typically approaches it, and it probably feels like or sounds like I'm really dogging on appraisers, and I'm really not, because there are some really good ones that they definitely, especially over the last little while, I think some of what they have done has helped our market, meaning not just appraising everything, trying to keep it within a reasonable amount of the prices going up, but also they tend to kind of just see the past of what's happened versus forecasting kind of where it's going. And we go out and see that a little more. So here's part of where I guess I'm saying. Part of what I would say I'm seeing take place in the market is I think most appraisers would look at what's gone on in the market and they still assume that same thing is happening. That meaning that we're getting 20, 30 offers on a property and you're having to offer tons over list price and blah, blah, blah. Versus I think what I'm seeing take place is inventory is increasing, which means there are more options for the buyers. You're not having to be so crazy on that. And I'll show you what I mean as we dive into this a little bit more. But just kind of keep in mind that this is what we're looking at, okay? And what the way that we're going to do an appraisal is we're going to approach it to begin with the same way that an appraiser does it, because at the end of the day, we're going to have to deal with an appraisal. And so we need to know, like, have an idea of what that's going to look like, okay? All right, what questions do you have before we jump in? Because what we're going to do next is we're going to go through, I'm going to pull up a property that was my first home, and we're going to run a CMA. I'm going to run you through here's what I would do to do a CMA on a property. And I'm going to just show you the process of what that would look like. But before we jump into that, any questions based on what we've talked about so far?
You mean your first home you owned?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
As opposed to what?
Well, your
Oh, just what I lived in.
first home you sold?
Yeah.
First home you,
First one I owned is also the first one. So.
well, as a professional realtor?
Oh, no. I see what you're saying. Yeah. All right, so let me get this pulled up here and screen share here.
Got lights out?
Probably.
Check the. Anybody afraid of the dark?
Just fall asleep.
Right.
That's probably the better way to say it. We gotta keep you guys awake.
I just about did that on a compliance meeting this morning.
That was interesting.
It was good,
watching
huh?
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought
You didn't see me dozing off?
it was- No, I was just listening.
That's good stuff.
It's really
All
good,
right.
good to know.
Yes, really good stuff.
Here.
I really do like those meetings for that. Just keeps you sharp.
All right, so I'm gonna share my screen here, so you guys in here should be able to see it, and you guys on Zoom hopefully can see it as well. All right, so here's what we're gonna do, is I'm gonna just run you through this, the same as how I would do it if somebody had just called me and said, hey, come out and take a look at our home, we're thinking about selling, okay? Now, for me, again, I'm gonna keep saying this, and I apologize that I'm gonna keep saying it, but this is an art, it's not a science. So you don't have to do it the way that I'm going to do it, but I'm gonna just show you how I like to do it. For me, the first thing that I like to do is, assuming that I just got the phone call from an SOI, or I was prospecting and came across a seller that said they were thinking of selling our home, come out and take a look, tell us what you think, or come to a listing presentation, whatever. The process that I'm going to go through first, the very first thing that I'm going to do is I like to go to the MLS, and then I'm going to go through and do a search for that particular home is what I like to do first. I first want to just see like what has happened with that particular home. So here's how I do it is, and if you have some minor questions on the MLS, I'm happy to answer them. What I don't want to do though is turn this into an MLS training class. If you have a few questions though, I'm fine with that. But for me, I like to use the full search. So I came up here, I go to search, go to full search. And then I don't put any other information in except for the house number to begin with. So here's the house number of the property is 5651. So there's 60 that have come up that are all statuses, which to begin with, I'm okay with that. So I'm just gonna, now if it was 100 or 200, I might narrow it down by saying Salt Lake County or something like that. But I'm just gonna hit view results here to bring up those 60. And then I'm just gonna scan through here to find the street, the one that has the street that it's on, which is right here. So here's Walnut View Circle. Go ahead.
Is there like a better, more effective way for doing this versus, so what I'll do is I'll go into search and then just check with the tax data. I'll use their house number there in the county. Is like this better for a reason or is that
No.
better for a reason?
No, either
It's
way.
a preference.
Yeah.
It's an eye.
The only reason I do it this way where I put in just the house number is just, especially in Salt Lake area, a lot of times somebody may have, instead of put in the, which tax would work, what you're saying. So I think I'm, Steve, sorry, is, I just don't know if somebody put in the coordinates instead of the street number or whatever, but using the tax ID would work as well. So. All right, so I'm just gonna then click on the very first one that I find. Once I get to that, if you click on history here, then you can see everything that's gone on with the property. And again, this is just a personal preference for me, that I like to go in and just see like, okay, what's gone on with this home? And if you look at the history, it's in reverse order here of what's taken place. So the oldest thing, so you can see, so I sold this home, was me here, that I listed it on August 18th, 2000, and we sold it on September 29th and whatever. Then after the people who bought it from me tried to sell it in 2008, didn't ever sell. They tried again in 2011, finally got it sold in 2012. Okay, so just for the sake of whatever, I just am always kind of curious of like what's gone on with the property. Occasionally you might find that it had been on the market and came off 3 months ago or whatever is what I like to kind of see. Yeah. Carmen.
So what type of information are you looking for here? I know it's out of curiosity, but what kind of is?
Good question. Yep.
your
What
thought process?
ultimately what I'm trying to figure out really when I'm doing this is I want to see, has it been on the market recently that it didn't sell is one of the things. But the main thing that I'm looking at is I'm just kind of wanting to see, like, if this were the scenario that I've gotten a call today to go out on this home, I would be looking at this saying, okay, they bought the home in 2012. So if somebody bought the home in 2012, what's that going to tell you? Ultimately, what I'm trying to see is, do they have equity in the home? If I saw that they just closed on it 3 months ago, I mean, in today's market, they still might have equity, but I'm kind of somewhat looking to see, all right, are we gonna have to push it a little bit on price, or are they gonna maybe be a little more flexible on the price is really, and just kind of overall, just kind of what's gone on with it, and have they tried to sell it? And if I had seen this, so let's say that it hadn't sold up here, that this was the last thing I had seen, what I would be noticing from this is I would be seeing, okay, from when they bought it, they tried to sell it, it didn't sell, they tried to sell it, it didn't sell. And so to some extent for me, it's giving me a little bit of an idea. And probably I'll say it this way. I had an agent come in to talk to me, might have been 5 months ago, 4 months ago, about a property they were gonna list. And he told me the price he was thinking, and I said, yeah, we're in a good market, but that price is still ridiculous. You're still way too high of the price. Well, as we pulled it up and looked at this, we noticed that a year ago, they tried to sell it at a price that was ridiculous and it never sold. So to some extent, I'm kind of getting into how motivated is the seller even potentially. Because if I saw this, I'm gonna have a little bit of an idea of that they may not be real motivated. It may be a scenario like this one, because this agent's like, hey, in today's market, I'll bet I can still
Yeah.
sell it for that price. He listed it way high and still didn't sell. And so to me, that's why I kind of go, all right. So yeah, and so ultimately, I'm just kind of trying to gather information to see what I can learn.
is each like block with CDM or reset, is each one of those blocks like when they try to do something, or is it each line that they try to do
Oh,
something?
yeah, good question. So what's happened is basically once the property's sold is gonna reset the date. The reset of the date, I don't know if it says it if I hover over the question mark here. Click on it. There you go. So basically what's gonna be controlling that is this. It's accumulates until the property is either sold or it's been off the market for at least 90 days. So anytime that it's been off at least 90 days, it's gonna have a reset
Oh,
that
okay.
line. But it has to be off market for at least 90 days.
Yeah, so that was a tough time right there.
Yeah, they,
This was a tough,
yeah. that
here's
was
here's the
tough.
thing that's interesting. If you ask me, so yes, this was a tough time in the market, but if you ask me which was tougher, I would tell you the market we have been in the first 6 months of this year is the toughest market I have ever seen. I honestly, I was more frustrated, granted, I'm not full-time selling anymore, but I was more frustrated this year than I was during this time of the year of the market.
Well, that'll be good for us newbies, because then
Yeah,
we'll
you've
think
come
this is normal.
in my 26
Right?
years of doing this, or maybe even 27 now, I don't know. I'm gonna just start saying in over 25, because I
Yeah,
kind of quit
Stop
keeping
counting
track now,
after a
yeah.
while.
In over 25 years of doing this, I will tell you, the market we have been in the last 6 months has been the hardest market to deal with.
Are you seeing now a kind of stabilizing or
Yes.
turnaround or?
I wouldn't say a turnaround,
Not-
but we're seeing a
a
stable,
little more,
Yeah.
yeah.
we're seeing more normal. Like for instance, that's the hard part is like, I have somebody that I'm actually helping write an offer, and I actually heard that we got right before I came up here to class, I heard that we got our offer accepted. We wrote it at list price though. And we had written one other offer, but we wrote it way below list price because I felt like it was too overpriced. And I got a notification this morning from that agent saying, we're doing multiple offers, calling for highest and best. So I think there are a lot of listing agents who are still thinking and probably told their seller, you're gonna get 20, 30 offers, it's gonna be way over list price. And yet, this one that I heard today that we got accepted, we went and at list price, I wrote it totally like a normal offer would be written. I put it subject to due diligence, subject to appraisal, seller to pay for a home warranty, like I did everything more normal. And I wrote it at list price, and it sounds like we got now, the agent did call me and say there was one other offer that was higher, but it was subject to the sale of a home and they didn't want to have to deal with it. So yeah, so in my opinion, we're seeing things become
Settle
more
down.
normal, which is great.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so from here, typically what I'm gonna do, the next step that I'm gonna do is I usually am gonna click on the most recent MLS number, bring up that MLS, and then I usually just am gonna print this, which I did do that this morning. I did go in and print that off, so I've got that here, so I don't have to keep referring back to it, although I should know for the most part all the information. But I usually am gonna print this off. Once I've printed this off, then is when we're gonna say, okay, now let's jump in and do our CMA. Okay, so I'm gonna start with it like we would have done if we were the appraiser. Meaning, what I'm gonna say is I wanna see the properties that have sold in, and then I'll down here in the number of days back, I wanna see properties that have sold. Now, again, for me, this where a lot of doing a CMA for me has become, it's more of a gut feel. Is like more what does my gut tell me to do? Now, for you guys that are newer, you may not have that to begin with. So how do you get it? Here's what I would say is if you're worried about pricing property, you should be doing CMAs at least weekly. So at least once a week, you should find a property, do a CMA on it, and then kind of keep an eye on it. Maybe a month later, go back and see what did it sell for compared to what you thought it would sell for. And see how good you were at predicting what it was going to do. That's what's going to give you the confidence and also then help you to see like how to do it. Okay. All right. So for me, because of that, I'm going to put in that I want to see 90 days back is what I'm going to say. It's just because, and again, I'm tying that to just kind of what's gone on in the last 90 days. Now, if we don't get very many comparables, I maybe would go change that to 6 months. You know, to some extent, I almost even feel like maybe even putting 60 days on there, but I just don't know what we would get. So anyway, at any rate, I usually, as a general rule, I'm gonna go 90 to 120 days is somewhere usually where I'm gonna start with. So I'm just gonna say 90 days back on that. Okay. Now, you'll notice here, I usually keep an eye on the number of matches and I don't have any. Anybody know
Yeah.
why?
You up to
Right here. I still have the house number in there. So generally, I always, when I start, I want to hit clear search criteria. So now I'm just going to do that again. So I'm going to put in that I want the solds, 90 days back. And if I look at that, I've still got 12,000 properties. So, okay, so what do
Now
I
you
need to
to narrow down.
Yeah, well, so for me, it's like, okay, now let's go into the map view here. And I'm gonna go to this little arrow thing, we'll do jump to get to the property. And you can either put in the MLS number or the address. So I'm gonna just throw in the MLS number here. Because by experience, I've learned sometimes when you put in this particular address, if you don't put in the city, so if you don't type it all out, it goes to some other state, so. I'm just gonna jump to it based on the MLS number. Okay, so here's the property. Now, the other option that you could do is you could do this radius tool search, which a lot of times I do that. And just hit radius here. And then I'm gonna say I want it to go 1 mile from, and the same thing, I could put in the MLS number or the address. Set the criteria. All right. So if I hide that though, yeah, you can see I still got 78 properties
that's
that
a
have
lot.
sold in the last 90
Still gotta
days within a 1
narrow it
mile
down.
radius. Okay, so maybe we don't want to use 1 mile then, so let me get rid of that. So instead, what?
I would probably go like this 4 months or like less than 90 days.
Less than 90
like
days.
1
We
month
could
or
do
2
that.
months.
So yeah, you want to do
That is a
that?
lot of property. That's like probably the most I've ever seen.
Well, let's see. Let's do that. Let's see what difference it makes to say just in the last 60 days within that 1 mile radius. There's still 54, which is more than I want to use. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and get rid of that. And instead, I like to use this either the rectangle or the point and click. I'm going to just use the rectangle on this. And I'm just going to follow this barrier right here of Mountain View. And maybe, I don't even know if I want to quite go this far, but let's just see what that does. That gets us down to 32. So again, for me, it's really more of just kind of looking at it and saying, okay, what's the area that we want to use for this? And I'm going to go back to this radius tool again. And I'm just going to change it to, let's just say 1/2 mile and see what that does. Yeah, that gave us 15. So that's probably a pretty good way to go about it. All right, so I've put in here so far that we've got solds going back 15 days.
You
And
okay with that?
did the what?
You okay with that? Or did you know that was coming? Sorry,
Oh, I
guys.
just hadn't seen.
It's. Stop you, but it's highly.
I'm
important.
okay if she's okay.
Okay.
So I don't know what else. Lost my train
You were
of thought
telling
there.
us what you put,
Oh,
solds.
Yeah, so here's what we have not put in here yet is the style of the home, the square footage, any of that. So really, we may even come back because having 15, depending on what happens here. So I'm gonna go to the style. Now on the style, this is a tri-level, multi-level. But again, coming back to where this is an art, not a science, one of the things, and I haven't seen this so much lately, so maybe I don't even need to bring it up, but it used to be, and I think it's worth bringing up because I think at some point we may see it again. What agents would do is sometimes an agent will look at that and say a 2-story is going to be more attractive than a multi-level. And so I've seen agents that would list a property and market it as a 2-story when it's really this multi-level home. And so if I was not finding comparables, if I wasn't finding enough of them, I probably would go and do a search for 2-story as well as the multi-level, just to see. Now I'm gonna not use actual 2 stories, but I would want to see, did some agents list a multi-level as a 2-story?
So you say multi-level, that's like an underground basement, a main floor, a top floor versus just the main floor and the top floor? Is that
It's like
kind
a
of thing?
half.
No,
it's not a
so-
Split level.
Yeah,
It's like
so let me, here, I'll just pull it up and show you what I mean. So like on this property here, once we get inside, if they have some, okay, so you walk in the door and you're on this level is gonna be this living area. And then right behind where the photographer is the kitchen.
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect, right here.
Okay,
But then you go
it's-
down a few stairs, like typically 4 or 5 to the family room. Up here's the bedrooms. And then there's another stairway down here. And some multi-levels will have, so this one's got 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. And there are some that have actually 5 levels.
Yeah,
So that's kind of what makes it the multi-level. Does that make sense?
versus the.
This, a 2-story is gonna be a basement. The whole main area, you're not gonna have a 4-step down to the,
What if you had like a 20 stair down to a basement, your center and a third? Is that just
2-story.
That's a
Like a-
2-story.
That'd be
that's
a 2-story.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Although, if you're in California, it would be a 3-story
Yeah,
because,
and that's
but,
what.
yeah.
But then same with appraisers, like they don't count, it's like
lot of
above
them
grade.
Above grade,
living,
yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
dumb.
yeah. Okay, so we've got 7 property. Let me go back to the search here. So we've got 7 properties here by putting in the multi-level. Let's just throw in a square footage down here, just cause, and let me kind of explain too on this. So in terms of square footage, the square footage on our property is just over 1,800. So let's just say it's 1,800 square feet. What should we put in as a range here then for our square footage?
1,500 to 2,000.
Okay, so let me explain to you here's how I do it. And again, doesn't mean it's right. I'm just telling you, since I'm teaching the class, you get to learn how I do it. But here's how I do it, is I try to think again, the way a lot of people will approach this is from the way that a seller would approach it or an appraiser would approach it. I like to approach it from the standpoint of how's a buyer gonna buy? And here's what I mean by that. This home is 1,800 square feet. In my mind, when I'm gonna put in the square footage, I like to think of it as a buyer who wants, well, let me back up, sorry. A lot of agents would do it as a range. They will say, I'm gonna do 10% of, the range is gonna be 10% or 15% or whatever, which is fine. And there are times that I will do something like that. But I still also like to try to stop and think in terms of like barriers. So when, for example, on the map, I had said to you guys, like, if I was gonna not do this radius search, I would have used this road as a barrier, as like a cutoff for me where I'm gonna do my property searches. And probably potentially, if we hadn't had enough, I would have gone from Mountain View over to Bangor and from 5400 south down to maybe 78 south or something. Like I'm going to use kind of main roads as barriers. Well, the same concept then for me comes into play when we're talking about a square footage. So I like to think of it and saying, okay, a buyer who shows up saying, I want a home with 2,000 square feet, at least 2,000, is probably not going to consider buying this house. So I'm not going to use comparables of a home that sold that had 2,000 because I feel like they're going to be, it's a different buyer we're comparing against. Does that make sense? Now, and I don't know that I'm right, but that's how I tend to think. So instead of putting in 2,000 on the square feet, you'll notice I put in 1999. And for me, I just do that because I'm like, once you hit 2,000, I feel like the person who bought that home that had 2,000 square feet may not have considered this one. And so the same thing on the lower side, which for me personally, I probably would have said more like 1,600, but I think 15 is fine. So anyway, same thing on year build. Here's how I think about it. The year build on this property was 1993. typically, the older the home, the wider the range I'm gonna use on your build. The newer the home, the more narrow of a range. So for example, if we were doing a CMA on a property that was built in 2018, I'm not gonna go from 2008 to today on that. I'm gonna keep it a little bit closer. So versus if we were doing a CMA on a property built in 1920, I'm probably gonna use from 1900 to 1940. I'm gonna use a much bigger range. Does that make sense? Okay.
What, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So what is the reasoning for that? What's so the newer, you're gonna go, the range is gonna be
Closer.
Closer.
Yeah, good
That's
question.
close. For what reason?
So for me, the reason being is typically if it was built within the last few years, I'm again trying to think like the buyer. The buyer who's gonna wanna buy that home isn't interested in one that was 10 years old. They're wanting a newer home versus when you get into the older homes, you know, at 1920 or something, I'm kind of thinking the buyer for that property probably doesn't care as much and maybe good with it. So yeah, just
You know,
personally.
oh, sorry. I just want to add something on that. I think when you're going with older homes, you've got to, well, any home that you're analyzing, you got to look at the history, but you got to look at the comments and see if it's an older home that they've redone electrical, plumbing, stuff like that. And the effective year can compete with something a lot newer, then you've got to adjust those years.
Yeah, and like I say, that's just it. That's where it's an art, not a science. Unfortunately, and I hate that honestly. I still honestly wish it was a scenario you could just plug in your bill, the square footage, the location, and the computer.
Right.
Here's the price.
Don't we all?
I know, but it just doesn't work. So anyway, okay, good.
But before we
Yes.
move on,
No, you're
on
good.
the square footage you put in, is that the livable space or is that including all of it, the basement and everything?
Good, yeah, good question. So the total square footage that I put in here is going to include the basement, does not include the garage.
Okay,
So yeah.
it
so-
does include the basement.
But it does include the basement. Yep. Now, actually,
Because the
and-
appraisal that I have on my home, he did not include the basement.
yeah, so there are times, so a multi-level property like this, I'm gonna do total square footage. If I was doing a home that was a rambler or ranch style home, then a lot of times for me, I will, when I'm looking for comparables, I will do the square footage. Rather than typing it in there, I would have come down here and put in right here
Oh,
on the
okay.
main area, the square footage of it. Two-story, or excuse me, a split entry, I may do the same kind of a thing as well. But as a general rule though, I'd always do total square footage. So it'll be including the basement. All right, so you can see we're down to 6 properties now. Ultimately, what I'm looking for when I'm trying to do this is you want to get somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, if we had 10 or 12, I would actually probably still be okay with that. Meaning, so like if we had left this at a 1 mile radius, or even let's just throw it in. It's like 3/4 of a mile.
No change. Oh, yeah, it did change too.
So hang on, let's just do 1 mile then and see. So to some extent, I want to have a few, but I don't want too many. So like even 11, that's fine. So here's basically what I'm going to do then, is the next step for this is I want to do view results. And this is where what Rebecca was just talking about is where I'm going to now start to take into account some of the condition and those kinds of things. Up until this point, I haven't really been worried about if it's been updated or not updated or anything. I've mostly just been trying to get a reasonable number of properties. If I had 30 here, I would have then said, hey, let's shrink the area, or let's try to find something that, you know, maybe we put in beds or baths or whatever, but I'm going to try to get it to be a little bit more narrow, but I want to get kind of in the range. Okay. All right. So the next thing that I'm gonna do then from here now, and we're not gonna do this as detailed right now as I typically would do it if I were doing the CMA. Because just for the sake of time, but ultimately what I'm gonna do now, the next step with this. So the next thing we're gonna look at here is, let's assume, so based on what we looked at as the history on this property, let's assume that they've rehabbed it, because that last one, when it sold, this property sold for 125 in 2012. Okay. So let's assume when they bought it in 2012, I mean, it was a foreclosure basically at that point, and so it needed work. Okay. And so let's assume that the person who bought it has gone in and totally updated it. Okay, so that's going to be our assumption is that our subject property has been updated. So now what I'm going to have you guys do is help me decide which of these comparables to keep or not keep. Okay. So for me, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and be looking at, so the square footage on this one is 1998 versus ours was 1800. So it's got almost 200 square feet more, which is a bit more. The other thing that this one has that, and I probably should have kept that other property pulled up just so you guys could see it, but this particular property's got 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Our subject property has 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. So for me, kind of what I'm going to ask you guys, do you think we should keep one that has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths versus 3 bedrooms and 1 bath that's up on the upper level? And there's not a right answer.
Keep the 2 bath, I would think.
Keep the 2 bath, but our subject property only has 1.
Oh, okay, then no.
I would think it's who you're talking to, because if you have just a dude who wants to live in that house, that's fine, but it's like, oh yeah, here's a family, we want our own bathroom as the parents, and our kids need a bathroom to get ready for school, like, I would hate that, I would
That's a
never,
deal
ever even
breaker.
want that at
Yeah.
all.
Yep.
So, I would probably.
So
go with
here's the
1
interesting
bathroom.
thing. So here's what's interesting to me is I use this property every time I teach this class and have for, I don't know, 10 years at
And you
least.
lived in this house too.
And I built it. I mean, personally didn't, but had it built.
Okay.
And I will tell you, it's been interesting to see. There used to be a difference, a big difference, if it had the master bath versus one that didn't, like our subject property doesn't. What I've noticed over the last number of years is it doesn't seem to matter actually. So it's interesting because it would still I'm with you, Aiden. It would matter to me.
Oh, yeah.
Even
Never.
today, like I wouldn't, today, my home has 2 full baths upstairs and we're thinking about creating a 3rd upstairs. Yeah, well, because it's got 4 bedrooms up and we could, if we took a little bit of, it doesn't matter. But my point
Get excited
being,
about
it
it.
would be nice to have, because now my kids are kind of grown and for the most part, and we've got some friends that come from St. George and stay at our house, and it's like, it'd actually be nice to have another bathroom up there. So yeah, in my mind, it's a big deal, but it's interesting because this is a good thing to make sure you guys understand. Part of what we are doing as we're doing this market analysis that makes it a little bit different than an appraiser. See, an appraiser is going to look at it and give you more value for a 2 bath up than a 1. But what I've noticed over the last number of years as I've done this, the buyers don't really seem to care that much. That's what's interesting to me. Now, maybe today we'll get in and see that isn't the case. But I've seen some homes that have same quality of upgrades and condition, that the 1 bathroom sold for more than the one with the 2. And it surprised me that that's the case. But so here's the point. Part of what you're looking for as you're doing the CMA is to figure out what are the things that seem to make a big difference or not make a difference. And I will tell you, when these homes were newer, it seemed to make more of a difference than it does now that they're a little bit older. And I don't know why that is, but it just is. Okay, so we're gonna look at this. The only thing I would say for me, knowing that we have 11 properties to choose from, having the 3 bedroom, 2 bath and 2,000 square feet, I might not want to use it. So go ahead, Rebecca, or is that an old raised your hand?
No, that's, I really think it depends on the price range. As far as bathrooms. If you're in that earlier price range for new time home buyers and that, maybe it can be very competitive whether it has one or not because of condition overshadowing that. But once you get above, say even as low as 400,000, bathrooms are a huge issue, I think, but you let me know.
We're about to find out, because this one that sold here was at 520, which I paid $75,000 for this house that we're running a CMA on, and every time I do this, I kick myself that I didn't keep the property.
Oh, what area is that? I can't read the address.
It's kind of Kearns.
Is it off the 5600 West?
Yes.
So is it in the West Jordan area that's been,
Well, yeah, you got West Valley, West Jordan, and Kearns that are all kind of mixed in with each other.
right, in that Ochre area that
Yeah,
was,
it's not in Ochre Shadows, but close.
I find that if it's got a West Jordan address versus a Kern address, it'll actually appraise for more.
And that's something else I would say that used to be true, but.
It's changing now.
That changing,
Yeah, 'cause
interesting.
it's not
Thanks.
so great anymore. Not that I don't think anybody live in Ochre Shadows. I'm not gonna offend anyone. Okay.
Well, I think the Olympics location in Kearns and that aquatic center and that has really upgraded Kearns' reputation.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll see here. All right, so for this one, I would honestly, for me, to begin with, I'm iffy on we would keep it. So I'm gonna say, let's quickly look at the condition, which we already did. And you saw, I mean, like this is
It looks
nice.
pretty nice.
It's really nice. So in fact, I would almost say maybe too nice, but
Yeah.
okay. So go ahead, what?
Is it too nice for Kearns or what? Just too nice?
No,
in general
compare,
for
like,
price?
well,
Oh, it's too nice compared to your comparables.
Well, no, just
look
I-
pretty nice.
more so, I guess what I'm saying is I kind of feel like what we may see, and I may be wrong, but we may see that it doesn't net you that much more by having it that nice. I guess what I'm
Yeah,
saying, but
no,
we'll see.
yeah.
All right. So at this point, without having only looked at that one, I'm iffy on if I would keep this one or not, is I guess what I'm saying. And mostly because of the square footage, but let's see what happens. So we go to the next one. I like what they were trying to do on this picture. I'm not sure it kind of worked.
Oh, yeah, it's horrible.
They were trying to make it look,
Like,
They're like 20 minutes
Like
too
low
late.
you were a little bit too late on taking your picture. Okay, anyway, but let's see what it looks like. So 1760 is the square footage. Looks nice inside. But I would say not as nice as that other one, right? But updated, new carpet, new paint, looks like they have new cabinets or at least put some stuff on them. So, I mean, looks pretty good.
looks pretty good.
So that one is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. So it's 1 bedroom less up, but same number of baths, a little less square footage. That one is one I'd for sure keep. Let's go to the next. This one here, about the same square footage, 3-bed, 2-bath. Let's kind of see. This one's it is still a multi-level, but it's a different layout of a
It's
multi-level.
a 3-car garage too.
And a 3-car garage, so I'm probably not gonna keep this one, but let's see.
And so this is pretty much the same style, but instead of the garage being on the side, like the comparable, they just moved the garage to like the front of
The-
that room, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
garage
so-
is under the bedrooms versus the side.
Yeah, so the difference is on the one, when you go down these stairs, you would go into the garage versus this one probably has a
South door.
bigger room, another room there.
We can see it from the very front of the house. It's like that big,
Yeah,
whatever.
That looks nice, but.
yeah, so it's nice as
It's-
well. Yeah, so like this is probably a bedroom that's there where the garage would have been on the other one. So, okay. Keep it or don't keep it.
Mm,
Another thing
maybe
that's kind of
maybe not, I don't know.
like a realtor's secret is, I mean, you get to kind of pick your comparables, whatever's gonna like help your case a little bit, like you can kind of work
Sure.
it a little bit, but you want them to still be accurate.
Yeah, you still want to be accurate. And the other thing I've found is you have to keep in mind that, especially if it's, I agree with what you're saying, but if there's a property that's like in the neighborhood that you kind of have to use it, because when you get there, they're gonna go, well, what about them? I know that one sold.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at this one's not updated. So I would just say we probably wouldn't keep that one.
Yeah. no.
Okay, so I'm gonna just hit remove here to get rid of that one. We would come to this one. You get the whole idea here. Well,
Yeah.
basically what I'm doing is just kind of looking to see how
The yard
comparable.
looks horrible, but the
Yeah,
inside's pretty.
Yard's bad, but the inside's
Not
okay.
bad.
By what, like 1,200 square feet?
For what? Oh, this 19.
Oh, looks way small in the pictures.
Yeah. So it's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath up there. That's interesting. I haven't seen that very many times. Where
Yeah,
it's just
it's
a
like
half
a-
bath up there, but, okay. So, but you get the point, right? So what I would be doing is coming through, looking at these, trying to decide, do we keep it, do we not? Is it a good comparable?
Whoa, get rid of some of their stuff.
Yeah, that's too much stuff, huh? Okay, but not bad. And then we come down to this 420 here. See, and I'm saying we updated ours, so I wouldn't keep that one.
Yeah. Do you normally give them 3 or so?
Yeah, so good question. I typically want to find 3, 4, 5's kind of the max I would want to have of these sold. But yeah, so what we would want to do is try to identify from these, which ones are going to be the most comparable. And ideally, yeah, I want to try to find 3 that are as close to our subject as we could be, okay? So now we're into a 385, there's 375,
Yeah.
which my guess is
Not
gonna be-
updated at all.
Yeah, not updated. Okay, so let's get rid of that one as well. And let's even say we got rid of this one. So you guys tell me, so you guys on Zoom, you gotta commit to a price as well. Let me get rid of this one here and then let's see what we've got here. All right. I don't know if
Might wanna
Keep this one or not
that
keep it?
one, maybe.
I don't think I would. Unless, like I said, the only reason I would is if it was in the neighborhood where the subject property is, but it's not.
Right.
Somebody paid $520 cash for that.
What?
That's nuts to me, but I mean, it looks good
Just go to
inside.
show your old dress.
I know. Well, look,
Is it like in March? too?
Wow.
it's nice
That was
inside, but.
nice.
Yeah.
All right, so here's what I want to know from you guys, and for you guys on Zoom, throw in a price. So you got this one here that sold for $520. This one's a 467 sold for. This one's 464 and a 440 and a 425. So we got basically $100,000 range there. Wow. You guys tell me, based on this, what's the price you think this house should sell for then? Now, again, I know we haven't seen it, but let's assume this one is a 10, this particular property right here. Let's assume ours is an 8.5 or a 9, at which probably, I don't remember what this one was inside.
Yeah, that
Subject.
one was nice.
So I have
No,
a
well,
little observation, I guess, is when we look at these pictures and you guys will say, oh, it's not updated at all. The only thing I'm seeing is color. It's like a brown, but
They've
I'm not
done the
seeing any
flooring. The
problems
flooring's
with it.
any,
Is that more based on?
you're not seeing any what?
So like the one you said it was a 10, right? Go in there, it's all white like that, and you're like, oh, it's updated. But then there was another one that pretty much looked the same, except it was brown and had like the plastic board on it. Like it was still in good condition, but you guys like, oh, it's updated. That's gonna take a huge hit on value. But like functionality and like, I mean, really look like they're not falling apart or chipping or anything.
Right.
Is that like a huge factor of that, or?
So here's what I would say, for me, looking at like this one here, this one actually looks to me like what they did. See, I was gonna say, let's assume ours, I'm trying to look closer at the cabinets here, but it kind of looks to me like all they maybe did is paint these
Painted the
cabinets and
cabinets.
Put a knob on it.
put knobs on them, yeah.
And painted the,
That's it. So versus the other one where it's just brown
Versus-
and has a knob, like you guys like, oh, it's, you know, it's outdated, it's unfavorable, like.
Yeah.
And this is the nice one too.
Well, and what I would say is just what you're kind of looking at is, that's how the buyers are gonna feel about it too.
Yeah, it's all off of like emotion type thing, like, oh, it's better and newer.
Yep,
and
yep.
that's it. Yeah, unless I can like show them that, or. I
And
guess
that
maybe
is hard to
connection-
show them that.
Yeah, like maybe connection, like it's not that outdated, but
Yeah.
alright.
But to some extent, if you brought this up, I mean, if a buyer's out looking and they see this, or even just looking online, they see this versus the others. Now, here's the thing, what you're saying is right on. Part of what makes this one look so good is all the furniture,
Yeah, they've
which is
staged
not
it.
gonna be there when the person buys the house. But that is where the staging of a property and stuff comes into play. Because honestly, a lot of what makes this one look so good is the way that it's staged and the furniture and all that kind of stuff, which obviously worked. I mean, somebody paid cash $520 for it.
And, like a month ago, not a year.
So you
But
guys,
I think the paint is also an upgrade because they've got, not that two-tone paint is that big of a deal anymore, but the stairs look upgraded with the railings. And it just has an upgraded feel.
okay, so you guys on Zoom, throw it in the chat box. You guys in here, what price? Give me a price. What would you say if you were going out to sit down with the seller and you were had these as comparables? What price would you tell them they should list the home for? 460,
I'd say 480.
480? Aiden,
Where's the comparable?
475? What do you think, Aiden?
Where's the comparable again?
Which comparable?
Are the subject property, sorry.
Oh, where is it at?
Yeah,
Meaning, what do you mean by where is it at?
like, I mean,
How-
I just really look at like everything square footage and style and. That's
Well,
one thing too, is I
they're
really,
within a
it's
mile
almost good, cause you can get an appointment just out of a CMA, like, hey, I've seen your home online and everything, but I wanna come actually to your house and check out your home and see if you do any upgrades and kinda how your house is looking. Cause then I base that off of too, cause like you said, like, a lot of times it's perceived value like per person, like,
Okay,
for me, cabinets are cabinets as long as they're not.
so
chipping or
what
anything,
price would
that's
you
fine.
say on this?
I don't know, I can't remember like the subject property, but based off all these, yeah, probably around like 260 or 460 would be. a good one.
460? Okay, great. And there's not a right answer, guys, but I just wanted to kind of see. Okay, so now, here's what I would do for me at this point. Some people like to come in here and use this CMA report. I'm gonna sneeze again. I personally don't like this CMA report. It's just personal opinion, so use it if you want, but here's why I don't like it. Is typically what people will do is this. So I'm gonna populate the subject data here. So I'm just throwing the MLS number, 1096142. I think I'm gonna sneeze again. All right, so based on that, pulling in those comparables that we brought in, it's saying the price ought to be 453. But here's why I don't like this report. Here's what I have found agents do. Let's say you were going out to meet with the seller and they said they wanted to list the property for 500 or even 480. And you plug in and grab these comparables and you threw it in and it says 450. Here's what I found agents do. Oh, I can't show up having it say 450. So, I mean, a bedroom's probably
change
worth
it.
3,000. And the total square footage, what if we said 200? No, that didn't matter. 250. This is what I see agents kind of do. Oh, that didn't
Oh,
work
yeah.
either. 120.
Kind of mess with it.
Oh, it's not. All right, so your bill probably worth 8,000. Like, they'll come mess with it to get it to say what they want it to say. So instead, for me, and again, it's just personal preference. For me, I like to use the client full report. I just print this out and take this out to them.
Yeah.
And then what I like to do is this. I like to just sit down with the seller and go, okay, this house is a 10 out of a 10. Like, if we look at it and we're to see it, and I would be telling them, this home is probably worth more than yours. And what I would be telling the seller is because it's got a master bath up on the upper level that yours doesn't have. It's got 200 more square feet than your property has. So I would just be saying, so this home's a little bit newer and nicer than yours. It actually just sold, what, last week or 10 days ago, not even 10 days ago.
The yard is, it's interesting because the
Yard
yard is
doesn't look
not
great, does it?
that great.
That's because we're conserving water. It's a drought. I'm just kidding.
We're getting like perceived.
Does that work?
I don't
Can
really
we
care
say
about
that?
it.
I don't know. That's what I would say.
But
Right?
that's why they took the
Good
picture
work.
at night
What's the reason? People only need a
on
reason.
that other one.
Yeah, the other one could be that. Maybe that's why they did the other one that way. All right. So I would be telling the seller, hey, this one I feel like is probably a little bit nicer than yours. Then I would come to this one. I would say, okay, this one's got one less bath, about the same square footage. If we looked at the inside on it, we would be saying, you know, it's pretty similar to yours, or depending on, this one to me almost looks like they just painted the cabinets versus installed new ones. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I would be saying to our seller, hey, you installed cabinets or you didn't, you know, that this one did or didn't. You can see they did new windows here. So this one's got new windows in the property as well. So I would just be kind of pointing out, here's why this one's either the
When did
same
that
as yours,
sell? Oh, in
better
May.
or worse
Okay.
than yours. This one sold, yeah, a month
May.
ago. No,
Or
June,
no, June.
month
yeah.
ago for
Contract
467.
date. Okay.
This one sold just this month for 464. So I would just kind of be going through and pointing out the differences. Then I'm gonna say to them, what do you think on price? Where do you think the price should be? And what do you think they're gonna say when we show them all
900.
that? Yeah,
They're gonna want more.
they're gonna want 500
Well, my
probably.
home is better than theirs, so 550.
Yeah, they're gonna probably want 500 or something. Okay, but here's the thing. So this is great, but what do we not know? See, here's the hard part for me. Based on what we have seen so far, I would be where you guys are thinking. I would be saying more like the 460, I think is probably where I would be recommending on the price. Somewhere in that range. But what do we not know?
What I can get for my money.
And yeah, so do you guys understand what Rick means by that?
Yeah.
What you can leverage into a new property.
Well, what he's saying is, but so first for me, I want to see, let's see how many properties there are that are under contract or backup right now. That people have made an offer that's been accepted. And there's 7. So now let's take a look at the prices on those.
So by doing that, we have to keep in mind what the market's doing and that the appraisers are running behind the sold prices. And
Right.
I believe we can price this a lot higher than 465, maybe even 480.
Well, we're gonna find out here, yeah, and that's possible. So but let's see. So here's, if we go to the ones that are under contract right now. So here's the thing. Remember I said to you, the way the appraiser's doing is they're just looking back at the solds. I want to say, okay, the properties that are under contract right now, what were the buyers willing to pay more recently for the properties? And so now I would do the same thing here with this. Here's a 450, a 445, 429, 425. Now, we don't know what these sold for, which I would say that one's not a comparable.
Is this really like, would you, if you
That's a
want to
four.
challenge an appraisal? Like, cause they're
No.
not looking at some comparables, you're like, oh, this is why I chose this, cause these are the contract.
No, because an appraiser's not going to use any of these.
Yeah, 'cause technically this is like
Because
unverified data.
That's right.
It could be
it's
anything.
unverified and it hasn't actually closed, so it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like the story, I think I told you guys about the cabin, maybe it was in California, I was talking about it. But the cabin that we got under contract and it went really fast and then never closed. So you couldn't use that as a comparable because then it never really closed. So
I mean,
this
like,
one's
what's
a
the difference?
399 here. So when you look at this, if we were using only these as comparables, what would you say we should list the
I'd
property
say
for?
lower,
Yeah,
more like 440 or something.
Yep. See, this is why, to me, this is why it's so important of, like I was telling you guys, there are a lot of agents out there saying right now to sellers, oh, when we list it, you're gonna get 20 offers, it's gonna go for 20, 30, 40, $50,000 above list price. Well, and I don't know yet. I still don't know yet for me what I would say price on this, but I'm more inclined to say lower than higher after looking at what these. Now, here's the thing though. If we go back to, let me go back to the solds again. and we look at those solds. So that one went for 10,000 above. This went for 32,000 above. That one went for 14 above. So if that's the case, this one sold at list price.
This is when the market was
10,000.
really crazy though, like February, March, April, May, June, like that was crazy time.
Right. So, but that's why to me, I would be saying like a little bit, we want to be looking at this to say, okay, so possible that these are selling for 10 or 15 above. But even it's still, my personal feeling, just what I already told you guys earlier, I would not be surprised if these properties close closer to list price, maybe above, but not as much. I wouldn't be surprised.
So
Okay,
it doesn't show us the amount that's under contract.
no, nope. So based on this, anybody want to change what you would tell the seller to list it at?
I'd go close to 450.
Yes.
Okay.
what about-
459.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
but
the
what do we still not
459
know?
guy.
What do we still not know?
All that stuff.
What we don't know is what are we gonna be competing against? So for me, now is when I wanna look at this. So here's the thing. So let me stop real quick. On these 7 that were under contract, I would have printed off, I would have found the 3 or 4-ish that are the most comparable and printed those ones off and done the same thing. Here's why it's similar, here's why it's better, here's why it's worse. Based on that, what do you think of the price? Then we're gonna go to how many are for sale right now? So now in that whole same area, there's only one that a buyer could buy right now. So let's see what that looks like. And it's at 365.
Wow,
Should we go buy it?
we should buy it.
That's
Yeah.
low, yeah. Yeah,
It's
well,
4
let's
days on
look
the
at
market.
it. What's the square footage on that one?
Looks nice.
It's hard to tell. Those pictures are so dang small.
Yeah, we should make an offer on that one.
But that's not as updated.
Nope.
Not bad.
Yeah, cause that's what I mean, it's like you say updated.
Yeah,
like,
the
those cabinets still
cabinets.
look okay, like they're not chipping or.
Yeah, we can
falling
paint 'em
off or
white.
anything.
Put a handle on it. We can paint them white and put a
Yeah.
handle on. Is that, so is that what you were
Updated.
talking about, Abe?
Yeah, cause I mean,
Yeah.
like, paint it white, put a handle,
Paint it white.
updated, you know, like it's updated
There you go.
type thing. Cause yeah, those are nice, maybe the stove.
Well,
is
the
a little tricky.
appliances are
Yeah, the
older.
appliances are kinda older.
Well, let's go buy
Well,
it.
put a new appliance.
Rick's going to write an offer right now.
Right on. What's that all that?
Okay, so there's only one property for sale and it's for 365. So now what do you think on price?
And it was 3 beds and 1 bath, if I saw it right, so. Yeah,
So,
that's tough.
Let me show you the next thing that I didn't point out before that I want to look at. Oops, that's not what I wanted.
If it's a 1 home, I mean, I'd probably still be comfortable with doing like the 450-ish, 460. So if
So,
there was like 4 other, that's gonna be like, all right, we gotta deal with more.
so here's what this tells me. So let me just show you what, part of what I want to look at is it listed on July 8th and it went under contract on the 22nd. So to me, I'm kind of on these ones. And again, this is back to where just kind of developing kind of a gut feel. For me, kind of what I'm trying to figure out is in this area, have prices stabilized and maybe started to go down? Or are we about to see another flash of the prices running up? And why I'm saying that is there are 7 that are under contract right now. What that tells me is that there are still a lot of buyers looking in that area, but they have one property to choose from. And it's much lower priced and needs some updating is what a buyer is gonna feel. So I'm honestly, for me personally, guys, I'm a little mixed, meaning because of the fact there's only one home for sale, I'm more inclined to go back to the 460 or a 470 or even a 480. Because there's no, huh?
For something nicer, or?
Yeah, but for a nicer property.
Well, there's no
But the
other.
reason- there's no-
there are
yeah.
Other options.
At the end, but when Rick said, what can I get for my money? There's nothing you can get.
So that's why I said with the one, I guess, competition, it would still be okay to be priced at like 455, 460.
Yeah.
Cause like I said, there's a lot of buyers. So even if someone does buy that little property, it's like, all right, well, that's the next best thing. Except there's
Well,
like
my
20
guess
buyers.
is that other one that we just looked at, the active, well,
360.
first, it's gonna sell for a lot higher.
Yeah.
Is my guess. Now, so this one was about 10 days from
Yeah.
in the MLS to, and 5 days here. 5 days there. So to some extent, I'm kind of wanting to just see,
Maybe put it at,
this one was 22 days before it got an offer and it's in backup. So, I don't know, what do you guys think price wise?
how long has the active one been on the MLS?
What was it? I don't remember.
Said 4 days.
4 days.
What's the remarks? Are they accepting high or submit highest and best already? I don't know.
Needs some updating, flooring, paint, some repairs. Offers will be reviewed on Monday.
Cause when I see the other listing, is that, I don't know if it's like some kind of strategy or like the ladder is like right as they post it, there are multiple offers received.
Yeah,
like,
well,
right
yeah.
as they post
I
it.
kind of get from that, it's maybe needs more updating than we think, even pictures
Possibly.
are not
Possibly.
even showing everything.
So what do you think on price?
I'm sticking to the 460.
Yeah, right, 459, somewhere in there, 458.
Yeah, 450, I think is. what I would say.
Probably go 440.
Okay, so it's, okay. And I think it's, any of those are fine. For me, the only reason I would, for me,
Go up
that
a
I would
little
stay
bit.
higher is only because there's no competition. If there were 5 or 6 other houses for sale, then I would be looking at it going, okay, we need to be probably most competitive. So that's how I like to look at it, is just think about it in terms of supply and demand. That if there are a ton of homes for sale, there's a huge supply, that's gonna bring the prices down. If there's not any for sale, that the demand is gonna stay up. So for me, here's the other thing I will tell you that I have learned. And it did, not just because I do a CMA on this property every time I teach this class, but the demand in an area, the number of buyers buying in the area tends to stay about the same. Meaning, if there are 7 that are under contract right now, there are 7 people looking to buy still in that area. And they have 1 property to choose from. Well, if you have 7 people trying to buy 1 house that's not updated, so some of those buyers may even just be like, I don't want to deal with it. What's gonna happen when a new one hits the market?
Torn up the offers.
Yeah, in fact, actually, let's do this real quick, just out of curiosity. Let's go to these under contracts and backups. And I want to look and see which one is the most recent to have hit the market and see kind of what happened with it. So for me, doing a CMA is more about getting into the mindset of the buyers and the area and all that kind of stuff than it is just finding 3 comparables that have sold, which, like I say, that's more the way an appraiser's doing it. And for me, I feel like you got to get kind of into the mindset of what are the buyers thinking. Let me give you an example of this. If we went back even a year ago, maybe 18 months to 2 years ago, every one of these properties selling would have had concessions. So right here on where it shows concessions, 18 months, 2 years ago, every single one of them would have had concessions. There would have been $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 worth of concessions. Versus today, we're not seeing not one of
No.
these. Well, these ones are the under contracts, but even the solds, not one of them was going to have any concessions.
That's just seller contributions.
Yeah, that's the seller paying buyer's closing costs. So to some extent, what I'm saying is during that time, when I pulled these up and you had seen solds and they were all having $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 worth of seller paid closing costs, I would be going into my seller saying, look at this, every single property that has sold, the buyer has asked for closing costs. So you need to just plan on it. And in fact, let's just market it that way. Let's just put on the market, the seller will pay $5,000 towards buyer's closing costs. Because then we're getting into the mindset of what the buyer, because the buyer's thinking that we already know the buyer was gonna ask for that. So for me, why not market it that way so that when a buyer looks at it, your house will be more attractive because you've already agreed to pay the closing costs that everybody else is gonna agree to pay anyway to get the deal done. Does that make sense? So anyway, all right. So on these though, this is where I would, well, I just want to see, so that one was July 8th, 12th, June 16th. Okay, so that one's probably, I think that was it, wasn't it? No. Okay, that July 16th one, so that's the one that I'm kind of most interested right now. And it was 5 days on the market. And let's see if it does. Multiple offers received. See, so to some extent, if that's the most recent property that hit the market, there were multiple offers. Only one person got the property. So what does that tell you? We know
We know the buyer, there's buyers out
there
there.
are buyers out there
Want that.
looking, and what was the price this was listed at? $425, okay? But so to some extent, it may be even worth going through and looking at all the rest of these to see multiple offers or not, and you know, if they're putting stuff in there about that as to,
So the agent went in and updated that when they got offers. 'Cause you're not gonna start with that
right,
same.
no, you shouldn't.
Yeah,
You
you shouldn't.
shouldn't. That's, I've seen it before, like.
There are
they
some-
Price it super competitively and they just put it on there from the rip, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, multiple offers.
So
Yeah,
this
that's
one's-
gonna backfire.
This one's same thing, multiple offers, and this one was listed at $429.
What's been on?
This one,
5 days?
yeah, it was 5 days before. So, but basically, to me, that's where I just would be looking at this saying, okay, very likely. So this one failed. That's why this one was 10 days on the market. If we look at the history, it went under contract and then came back out. Because it said,
They,
buyer got cold feet. See, that's the hard part. That's the thing of why, when I said to you, this is the hardest market we've been through, is because a lot of times buyers were just throwing out offers on a house they didn't necessarily want. They get it accepted, making these ridiculous offers, and they go and add, I don't really want it. So.
Me twice.
It did happen on the listing?
I was the buyer's agent.
Oh, yeah. But then you ended up getting the property because of that? Or
No,
your
when I
buyer-
Went under contract.
Oh, and then
as a
your
buyer's
buyer-
agent, both of my
Failed.
buyers got cold feet and backed out.
that
5
just
minutes
happened
before,
to me
pension
with
price
my
lower.
cabin. Got,
Yeah.
like, just got cold feet. And I'm like, oh.
So
Yeah, so
this
it's
one again,
prepping
450,
the-
but it didn't say anything about multiple offers on here. So I think you guys are right on. To me, I would say somewhere in that 450, 460 range is probably what I would recommend.
See what? yeah.
And so kind of my advice for you guys though is I would just say this. To some extent, keep in mind that the inventory is increasing. We're not gonna see these crazy offers continue like we have unless the inventory shrinks again, in which case it will. But I think we've kind of come through that hardest part of things. And so just know when you're going out and meeting with a seller, this is the concept. Hopefully what you gathered from what I've talked about is what I'm really looking for is to try to get into the mindset of what are the buyers in the area thinking? And is it a frenzy? Is it not a frenzy? What are they, what are the properties looking like? Are there certain things that properties are selling better or worse because of? That's what I'm looking for to be able to go into the seller to say, here's why I think we ought to price it where we should price it. So anyway,
And that's what's important to them too. If okay, you want something quick, we're gonna get the most money.
That's right.
Because we're gonna take 2 different strategies depending on what you say.
that's right. Good. All right, what questions?
Are there any changes for a new build? Like, doing a comparable for, say, a new construction?
What do you mean by changes? Would I do something
Yeah,
differently?
would you look for, because a new build is, everything's brand new. So if you're, do you find it?
Yeah, so
comparable?
for me, that's where I was saying, ultimately, I would just be trying to find comparables that were new as well.
Yeah,
Because then you're comparing kind of the same kind of thing. So,
right.
so, all right, let's just wrap it up with this then. There are times that you're not going to find comparables. Like, meaning what we did today was a pretty simple one, and that's why I use this property all the time. Is it's pretty easy to do that. But
Yeah, like a
sometimes-
cabin, I
Yeah.
can't find a
Yep.
comparable for him, and he was so, I lost the deal because he thought the price was too high.
yeah, so here's the thing, in that scenario, what I like to do is, and I'm not gonna go through all the detail on it, but is I go through our pricing strategy with them, which essentially is I just tell them a CMA is our best guess. We don't know. And
Yeah.
if the seller feels like, so for example, let's say on this particular property we're talking about, that the seller said, I want to list it at 520 because I know the neighbor sold for 520. Great, I'm fine with that. I'll list it at 520. But I'm gonna say we're gonna follow a pricing strategy. As a general rule, I say every 3 weeks. In today's market, I probably would say we'll give it a week, maybe 2 weeks. And if we don't have multiple offers on the property or any offers, and we've had no showings, that is the market's way of telling you you're overpriced. So I just train the seller how to understand what the market is telling them. That if you're not getting offers, the market is telling, if you're not getting showings or offers, the market's telling you need to reduce your price. And I'll just go through the pricing strategy with them of just saying, in today's market, I would say every 1 to 2 weeks, we need to sit down and evaluate the number of offers and the number of showings. And if we're having no offers, no showings, we need to reduce a minimum of 7%. If we're getting some showings but no offers, we need to reduce it 5%. And we need to do that every 1 to 2 weeks till we get the property sold. So if they wanted to list it at 520, I'll do it at 520 if they'll follow that pricing strategy.
Yeah, that's good.
Because eventually you'll get to where then you'll get an offer and it'll sell.
Sell it.
And sometimes they feel like, well, I'm not gonna do that forever because then I could end up just giving it away. No, you won't.
No, he'll,
That's,
yeah.
when you get to where the price should be, the buyers will show up. So,
How much would you reduce the price every week?
so if I'm getting no showings, no offers, I'm gonna recommend to them 7%. A minimum, between 7 and 10. I usually tell them between 7 and 10, because then they'll say, okay, well, let's do 7. If you're getting some showings but no offers, 5%. Because if you're within 5% of where the price should be, you'll get an offer. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for being here, guys. So best thing you can do is do CMAs. The way you're gonna get good at it is just doing CMAs. Find once a week at minimum, find a property that's for sale and do a CMA on it. Or find one that's not for sale and run a CMA. The reason I say one that's for sale is run the CMA and see if you can guess where it's gonna sell and see how close you are when it actually sells. So
Oh, okay.
that's how you're gonna get confidence, is when you do it and you, like, for example, if we did it on this particular property that's on the screen, we said, it's probably gonna sell for 465. And it sells for 465, you're gonna be like, wow, I actually did good, so.
Yeah,
Or we might look at it and go, yeah, it's 450, but I feel like the market's changing, I'll bet it sells at 450. And it sells at 450, then you
then
feel
you're
good
like,
about it.
yes, like, yeah.
Does that make sense? All right. I don't remember what class is Thursday. Is it buyer packet?
I
I
think
think
this
it
was the one that I needed to complete my
Are you
12.
gonna send an
so
email
it's
out?
good.
Yeah, I'll send an email. I just don't remember off the top of my head. So, all right. Well, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you.
Have a